and keep it short. I know you're running late, and at the end of a long day, you don't need too many remarks. What I'm going to talk about is what we hope is the final phase of restart after the COVID. We've been here 3 times before where we thought we were going to starting back in June of 20, then the fall, then December, and here we are 2 years later. Hopefully this is it, although even our mayor now has COVID. So who knows what comes next. Where are we today? And I'm going to talk about just sort of business and the post-COVID economy, what business is concerned about and what we're thinking about in terms of what comes next. Today, actually, in terms of our macro New York City economy, we're in very good shape. And that's thanks to a couple of reasons. One was the fact that our key industries, financial services, professional services, the lawyers and accountants, the consultants, the technology industry, they managed to power through. They switched to remote work within less than 10 days after the first case of COVID. And they have been successful in operations, no job losses, in fact, job gains, and producing more tax revenues than ever and more profitable than ever. So from the standpoint of our overall economy, we lost only 5.5% of our economic output, our city's economic output during the COVID, the last 2 years. And that is much less than anybody anticipated back in March to June of 2020, when we had, at the peak in July of 2020, we had 920,000 jobs that we had lost. That number today is down to 260,000. So we've recouped those jobs, but there is a sad side to this story as well. The jobs that we lost were concentrated in a few sectors, what we call the brick and mortar economy. So it was local retail, it was hospitality and restaurants, entertainment, hotels, obviously. The tourism industry suffered dramatically, down from over 60 million tourists a year to fewer than 20 million. So that's a loss, and our hotels are still at 67% occupancy. So that was it. That area. Restaurants are still down 30,000 jobs. Retail are still down, restaurants are down 30% of their jobs that they had pre-COVID. And in the retail sector, they're down 15%. So this was a concentrated attack on a small section of our economy, including lots of arts and entertainment groups as well, and many nonprofits that could not operate remotely. And for them, this has been a real crisis. And that's why we've got such a focus on bringing small business back. Now, ironically, small business in our residential neighborhoods where people were working from home actually did relatively well, except for one bigger phenomenon that was happening during the last 2 years. And that is we had this dramatic switch from the service economy that we've known since the 1980s, direct provision of services, face-to-face services, to the digital economy, which was coming. Remember everybody talking about robots replacing workers, et cetera. It was coming, but it was coming gradually. It came very quickly in the last 2 years of the COVID with remote work, remote education, remote entertainment, remote everything, the advent of Zoom as a regular tool. So this transition to the digital economy, it reminds me of, and some of you may be old enough to remember, about what we went through in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, remember when American manufacturing moved offshore, we lost our ports, the container port industry came in, and New York, which had been a heavy manufacturing economy, lost half our Fortune 500 companies in 5 years. American Can, Rheingold Brewery, Domino and Revere Sugar, American Machine and Foundry, all moved out and left us, and 1 million people followed them. So the working middle class, the blue collar worker, of those eras moved out. And that's what this experience kind of is like, again, but it's collapsed into a very short period of time where we're having this dramatic shift in our economy. What has that resulted in? Well, it's resulted in a skilled labor shortage, among other things, which is important to Medgar Evers College because the work you're doing to prepare students for the business world is really important. Between the policies that restricted immigration that started under Trump and then were dramatically increased during the last 2 years of the COVID, the restriction on our access to global talent really created a terrible labor shortage in New York. And we now have one of our biggest challenges is how do we fill that gap? Stronger immigration policies would absolutely help, but it's really about the skills that are needed for the digital economy and going forward. Today, we have almost 300,000 open job postings in New York City. 82% of them require a bachelor's degree or better. We have 270,000 New Yorkers who are unemployed, but there's no match. They don't have the skills for the jobs that are available. And that's the challenge that we inherit today and that we have to fix quickly. Those jobs will only be fixed with strong partnerships between employers and educational institutions like Medgar Evers to figure out how can we quickly get people prepared, not just for the traditional skills, not that you need in the workplace, but for the skills that are required in this digital economy. That's complicated. That's our big challenge. Today, even though we bullied them out a few years ago, Amazon is the second largest employer in New York City. And some of those are fulfillment jobs, deliveries, et cetera. But a lot of those jobs are with Amazon Web Services in the technology area. And in fact, this is a portion of our economy, the technology sector, which is the fastest growing sector for jobs. And whether that's jobs in technology companies or in every institution you can think of, the big job openings in banks are not for bankers. They're for software engineers and technology experts. So this is really a change. Again, it was happening, but it was happening slowly. It's now happened suddenly, and we all have to respond. And I know that's something that CUNY is very committed to and working with a lot of institutions on. So what are the public policy implications, just quickly from the standpoint of the business community? The first is that we have to remain attractive to talent. New York City is a leader when it comes to the economy. We're the headquarters city for all these great world industries. And we've got plenty of jobs in these high skilled positions. So we're a leader in the economy. We're a leader in research and development. We have the greatest medical research institutions. After all, Pfizer, they invented their vaccine right here. That's a New York City headquartered company since 1849, in Brooklyn, actually, since 1849. So we've got a lot going on. During the last 2 years of the pandemic, investment in venture capital companies in the life sciences in New York City tripled. We've got a real cluster growing here. The healthcare industry has grown so fast, and obviously the public health sector, the entire health sector has grown so fast that now we have, again, huge shortages of people with every level, whether it's respiratory therapists or nurses, or huge shortages in that area. Really need the colleges to step up to fill those gaps. Public policy on taxes. In 2020, the state legislature raised taxes to make New York the highest taxed jurisdiction, the highest tax state in the country. We now out-tax California, which is, unfortunately, from a competitive standpoint, the folks in Florida and Texas and even Connecticut are taking advantage of to try and attract jobs. We are doing pretty good on keeping people here, but we've got to keep these jobs here and grow the jobs here. If talent moves out, that's an issue. A couple weeks ago, we did a survey of office workers because one of the big challenges we're facing, employers are facing, as well as the city, is getting office workers to come back to the office. Only about 30% of office workers are regularly in their offices today. That's 1.3 million jobs in the city. It's about a third of the private sector, of all the private sector jobs. And they've decided, many of them, and 60% of the workers in those industries are young people. The young people have decided that they can do their job from wherever, the local coffee shop, their bedroom, wherever. Employers do not agree. They think building a brand, building a team, that what you learn from being around senior people, experts in your area, they think that's very important. And there are in fact now studies coming out that demonstrate that analysts who worked remotely, the analysts that worked in the banking area that worked remotely for the last couple of years, have only 56% of the learning and training that those who historically worked in the office enjoyed. So there are big arguments coming out, particularly from employers, that people ought to be in the office. But we know there is a big change going on there with remote work. And we've got to do everything we can to accommodate that. And whether that's decentralization of the economy, you know, for a long time, we've had in New York City, a very Manhattan-centric economy. And everything goes in and out of Manhattan. I mean, our whole transit system is based on getting people, commuters, in and out of Manhattan. So we've had this Manhattan-centric economy, and that's changing, and that's going to diversify. And I think that's a permanent outcome of that we're going to see. Is we're going to see a decentralization of our economy, and it's not just going to be in the 5 boroughs, but the 5 boroughs are going to benefit and already are benefiting. But it's going to require new sets of planning, new policies that accommodate a more diverse, geographically more diverse economy as we go forward. The biggest issue we're facing with employees, and based on the surveys that we've done of over 9,000 office workers, their biggest issue today in terms of return to the office is not fear of COVID. It is fear of crime and public safety issues. And it is unhappiness with seeing so many homeless and mentally ill people who are not being treated. You know, New Yorkers care about their personal safety and security, but they're equally compassionate. It kind of defines our city. And so residents of New York, they want to be safe and they want people to be taken care of. And so those issues pop up. The length of the commute is third after public safety first, COVID second, length of commute, because more than 20% of the office workers in Manhattan spend more than an hour in their commute each way every day. And again, they've gotten 2 hours back in their day at least during the pandemic working remotely. They're very loath to give that up. So that's another challenge that we're going to have to face. Affordability. We thought that when COVID struck, that at first prices and rents went down, and there were some great deals out there in the first 6 months of 2020 of the experience with the COVID. There were some great housing deals on there that some lucky New Yorkers took advantage of. But today, the rents in Manhattan are higher than in 2019. We've had a reversal in that process, and the costs, the rents, values across the city and the suburbs have all gone up. And that has created an affordability crisis for New Yorkers that has to be addressed. So in terms of public policy issues, we have to figure out how to keep taxes competitive so we don't lose jobs to low tax, no tax states, but also how to make our environment more affordable and more livable, as they say. So the quality of life, the quality of our parks, the safety, all these livability issues have turned out to be kind of our city's Achilles heel. Can we deal with them? Well, we elected a mayor with a mandate to do that. He's celebrated his first 100 days last week, and let's hope he is successful. So I think that the last thing I want to mention is, of all the challenges that employers are facing now, for the first time, really, they are recognizing that the racial reckoning that came out of the killing of George Floyd, and that's been an undercurrent of the whole process of everything we've gone through in the last couple of years, that continues to be a priority. And I think this is going to end up being a positive thing in New York because we are a more diverse population than other cities. And we know how to get along if we make the effort. Employers are now really focusing on diversity and inclusion as a top priority in terms of their hiring, their apprenticeship and training programs. They're launching a lot of new programs, many of them with CUNY institutions that are really designed to make sure that all ranks of corporate New York are represented. And entrepreneurial New York, there are a lot of new incubators and programs to support entrepreneurs. In one outcome of the COVID in the last year, today, there are 200,000 New York State residents selling their products on Etsy, which is a Brooklyn company, obviously. So that's an example of how people have really taken the opportunity during these crazy last 2 years to start their own ventures. And this is something that we have to really support because that's part of diversifying our economy. Startup funding from venture capital has increased 3 times since 2019. It was over $49 billion last year went into New York startups of venture capital. This is an opportunity, again, for students to really think about and how they can take advantage of opportunities that are both in the corporate business sector, but also in the entrepreneurial sector. We have 240,000 businesses in New York City. About 80% of them have fewer than 20 employees. This is a city that rewards entrepreneurship. So I think that's the last message I'd like to focus on. I think that our entrepreneurial economy going forward post-COVID is going to be more important and more vigorous than ever. So lots of opportunities for young people out there. I guess I should mention London. Throughout the COVID, we've trailed London in terms of the patterns of the virus by about 3 weeks in New York. But we now are hopefully both coming out of COVID, and we certainly feel a kinship with London as we go forward. New York and London are the world's 2 greatest cities after all. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you.